How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. I'm Sam Holcman. Thanks for joining me. And this particular broadcast is on the concept of the difference between architecture models and implementation models or relationship models, depending on what you're comfortable with. So the equivalency here is architecture models are like engineering, and implementation models, relationship models, are about manufacturing. It's not one or the other, it's both. Now, in order to understand that, you have to recognize that the graphical representations and the understanding of these models, not just the graphical representations, are different. Architecture models, quite simply, are what's referred to as ontologies. And ontologies are the most common thing that you and I see when we maneuver a grocery store, when we go into a big box store, when we go into a clothing store. Virtually everything that you and I in our daily lives see is architecturally consistent displays of things, because architecture is about what we're trying to understand. Implementation is about a recipe of doing something. They're different. So an ontology, the phrase behind that, is kinds of things together. Let me repeat, kinds of things together. So an analogy. Let's go into a grocery store for just a moment. And in the grocery store, you go into the dairy section. So right away in the grocery store, it's divided up into different areas, kinds of things together. So we're in the dairy section. Now let's go into the dairy section. Within the dairy section, we see an area of yogurts. Kinds of dairy. Yogurt is one. Now, kinds of yogurts. I'll give you an example. Greek yogurt and non-Greek yogurt. Kinds of Greek yogurt. 5% fat, 2% fat, 1% fat, 0% fat. Kinds of 5% fat. Cherry flavored, peach flavored, vanilla flavored, plain. Kinds of things together is the most useful to understand what you're trying to recognize as the things of interest to the organization, not how to implement a specific recipe. Now, on the other side is the concept of implementation, or its related word that we call relationships. Those are what commonly people see in enterprise architecture and business architecture if they do not recognize that architecture is different than implementation. Now, the implementation models that are most common to people are flows of things, A to B to C to D to E to F, or hierarchies. A hierarchy is parts of things. Parts of an automobile, doors, windows, seats, parts of automobile. Kinds of automobiles are very different. It's a different thinking. Things of interest to the business. So as you see here, it's not one or the other, but it's different. The other thing about implementation and relationship models, using the word agility, or another word flexibility, is right away those are constraining. It's forcing a specific sequence. So if you're talking about agile enterprise, agile business, right away you see that those representations are restrictive because they're already putting things in a specific order, A, B, C, D, E, or once again, hierarchy, kinds of things together. So it's not one or the other, it's both. Please recognize that when you're looking at methodologies or processes or all the stuff that you see on the internet, that claim to be architecture, they're actually implementation. And perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, that is why you do not have a seat at the big person's table, as I like to call it, actually helping the business run better and enable its business and mission strategies. That's really what enterprise and business architecture is about. So in closing, it's not one or the other, it's both. And if you're looking at an enterprise architecture or business architecture approach, and you happen to see most of the time flows or essentially hierarchies, right away now you can recognize that you're not actually doing architecture, you're actually doing implementations. I hope this helps. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.